Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. Pentagon to become Department of War. Trump orders rebranding reflecting military focus. IC raids target Hyundai plant and food facility. Significant apprehensions reported. U.S. jobs market weakens, raising economic concerns. Job growth slowing. Allies pledge troops for Ukraine. Putin and Trump seek division. Geopolitical tensions escalate. Israel expands control in Gaza, destroying infrastructure. Ongoing conflict continues. Anutin Charnvirakul becomes Thailand's prime minister. Political instability persists. Trump reduces Japanese car tariffs after negotiations. Trade disputes remain complex. Trump seeks Supreme Court intervention over FTC Commissioner. Legal challenges ongoing. Boston sues Trump administration over sanctuary policy. Legal battle unfolds. Justice Department considers banning transgender gun ownership. Controversial policy under review. Trump's nominee's past Twitter activity raises concerns. Scrutiny of past actions continues. Trump's growing influence over the Federal Reserve is under scrutiny. Monetary policy question. Trump allies explore role for Eric Adams in administration. Political maneuvering observed. Trump urges Europe to pressure Russia and China in Ukraine. Diplomatic efforts continue. President Donald Trump is set to sign an executive order rebranding the Pentagon as the Department of War, a move reflecting a refocusing on military strength and a return to historical naming conventions. The initiative, spearheaded by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, aims to project an image of readiness and resolve, aligning with Trump's rhetoric surrounding American military victories in past conflicts. The rebranding involves utilizing secondary titles such as Secretary of War, Department of War, and Deputy Secretary of War across official communications and documents within the executive branch. This shift harkens back to the original Department of War, established by George Washington in 1789, but was replaced in 1947 following significant military reorganization under President Harry Truman. Truman's National Security Act of 1947 consolidated the Navy, Air Force, and Army, previously the Department of War, into the National Military Establishment, which was later renamed the Department of Defense in 1949. The current effort is intended to counter perceptions of the Department of Defense as overly focused on defense rather than active war fighting. Hegseth has been implementing similar changes, including reverting to Confederate-era names of military bases, previously renamed by the Biden administration, and renaming a Navy oiler ship that had been named after a gay rights activist. The rebranding process is expected to involve a substantial financial investment, estimated at $1 billion, encompassing changes to agency names, emblems, email addresses, and uniforms. While Congress would ultimately need to approve the permanent renaming, the executive order authorizes the immediate use of the new titles. The move comes amidst heightened geopolitical tensions, particularly following China's recent display of advanced military hardware. The administration believes the change in nomenclature will reinforce a warrior ethos and signal America's commitment to military preparedness. Critics, such as Senator Andy Kim, view the renaming as a politically motivated gesture, lacking substantive strategic value. The executive order represents Trump's 200th signed executive order during his presidency. Hundreds apprehended in multiple ICE raids targeting Hyundai plant and food processing facility. Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, conducted a massive raid at Hyundai's Metaplant electric vehicle and battery manufacturing facility in Elabel, Georgia, resulting in the arrest of approximately 475 individuals. The operation, part of a multi-month criminal investigation into unlawful employment practices and other serious federal crimes, involved numerous agencies including the Georgia State Patrol, FBI, DEA, and ATF. The majority of those detained were South Korean nationals, and while Hyundai stated none of the detained individuals were direct employees, the raid highlighted concerns regarding labor practices at the site. The Metaplant, a significant economic development project creating 500 jobs, was temporarily halted during the investigation. Simultaneously, ICE carried out a separate raid at a family-owned nutrition bar processing facility in Caddo, New York, apprehending upwards of 70 employees, including parents with children. Governor Kathy Hochul condemned the operation, stating it would shatter hard-working families. The New York raid involved questioning virtually the entire workforce and resulted in arrests at the Oswego Detention Center. The Georgia raid significantly impacted the planned opening of the Metaplant, a project lauded by Governor Brian Kemp as a boon for the Georgia economy. The scale of the enforcement action, involving heavily armed agents and tactical vehicles, underscored the federal government's intensified focus on workplace immigration enforcement. The simultaneous raids across multiple states demonstrate a broader trend in immigration enforcement under the current administration. The incidents raise questions about labor practices within large-scale manufacturing projects and the potential disruption of economic development initiatives. Both Hyundai and the nutrition bar company have expressed their commitment to compliance with all laws and regulations, though the investigations continue to assess their adherence to labor standards. The ongoing investigations will likely lead to further scrutiny of employment practices within the automotive and food processing industries. The U.S. jobs market weakens further, signaling economic concerns. Recent data reveals a significant weakening of the U.S. jobs market in August, fueling fears about the overall economic health. Job additions were minimal, with only 22,000 positions added, falling short of expectations and marking the lowest growth in months. The unemployment rate edged up to 4.3%, the highest level in nearly 4 years. This trend follows a string of concerning data released earlier in the week, including substantial downward revisions to May and June employment figures, with June showing a net job loss, the first decline since 2020. Investors are anticipating a response from the Federal Reserve, expecting an interest rate cut at the upcoming meeting, driven by the increasingly weak labor market indicators. President Donald Trump's reaction involved firing the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, based on unsubstantiated claims of manipulated data. Analysts attribute the slowdown to several factors, primarily President Trump's economic policies, including tariffs and immigration restrictions, which have increased business costs and uncertainty. Government spending cuts have also contributed, leading to the dismissal of thousands of federal workers. Manufacturing and construction sectors experienced payroll declines, while healthcare continued to be a primary driver of job growth. Accounting for 15% of total employment, the overall job growth average over the past 8 months is a meager 74,750, the slowest since 2010 excluding the pandemic period. The labor force has expanded by 436,000 largely due to re-entrants seeking employment, and the median time searching for work has reached a 3-month low. However, the limited job gains are concentrated in the healthcare industry, leaving a significant portion of the workforce unemployed. Wage growth is also slowing, with the annual growth rate of average hourly earnings decreasing to 3.7% from 3.9% in July. Furthermore, a surge in initial jobless claims and a decline in available jobs indicate a cooling labor market. These trends highlight the vulnerability of the economy to shocks, particularly those affecting the dominant healthcare sector. The overall picture suggests a labor market facing considerable uncertainty and constrained growth potential. Western allies pledge troops for Ukraine as Putin and Trump seek to divide Europe. A coalition of 26 Western nations has formally committed to deploying troops by land, sea, or air to Ukraine in support of a ceasefire, following a summit led by France's Emmanuel Macron. This move comes amidst ongoing diplomatic efforts to end the conflict, complicated by divergent views between key players, particularly Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Trump has been actively attempting to mediate between the two leaders, while simultaneously blaming Europe for the stalled peace process. Putin, meanwhile, continues to pressure Europe to avoid deploying troops to Ukraine, viewing any such action as a hindrance to his diplomatic efforts. The Alaskan summit between Trump and Putin yielded little tangible progress, but highlighted the shared belief that Europe is impeding a resolution. Trump has repeatedly advocated for a direct meeting between Putin and Zelensky, though Ukraine's allies express concerns about Putin's potential to exploit such a meeting. Russia's strategy involves attempting to create divisions among NATO allies, aiming to undermine support for Ukraine. A significant development is the commitment of Western forces, though the precise nature and scale of their deployment remain somewhat vague, largely due to concerns about potentially assisting Putin's narrative. The European Union is also taking steps to reduce its reliance on Russian energy, though this has not dissuaded Russia from its strategic goal of disrupting Western unity. Despite Trump's efforts, a meeting between Putin and Zelensky remains unlikely, with both leaders exhibiting reluctance. The European Commission has reported suspected Russian interference through GPS jamming, further escalating tensions. Amidst the impasse, 26 countries have pledged contributions to a potential peacekeeping force should a ceasefire agreement be reached. The U.S. has indicated a willingness to provide a safety net for Ukraine, contingent upon a successful peace deal. However, the overarching challenge remains Russia's persistent efforts to sow discord and impede Western support for Ukraine. The situation underscores the complexity of the conflict and the significant obstacles to achieving a lasting resolution. The continued pressure on Europe to halt its support for Ukraine remains a central element of Russia's strategy. Israel intensifies Gaza offensive, expanding control and destroying infrastructure. Israeli military operations in Gaza City have escalated dramatically, with the IDF now asserting control over 40% of the territory's largest urban center. The intensified campaign focuses on dismantling what the Israeli military describes as Hamas-converted multi-story buildings utilized as military infrastructure, including command centers, weapons storage, and combat tunnels. Extensive destruction is occurring across several neighborhoods, including Sheikh Radwan, Zitan, and Tufa, with satellite imagery documenting the demolition of dozens of buildings over the past weeks and months. The offensive involves heavy bombardments and controlled explosions, resulting in widespread damage and displacement. Thousands of displaced Palestinians, representing approximately 90% of Gaza's population, have been forced to flee their homes, with many returning to northern Gaza after temporary periods in the south during previous ceasefires. The destruction extends beyond residential buildings. Tents providing shelter for displaced individuals have disappeared, and signs of street activity have been eradicated. IDF armored vehicles are actively traversing affected areas, leaving fresh track marks and further damaging buildings, including a cemetery containing the remains of British soldiers who died during World War I. The military claims these structures are converted into combat complexes, facilitating ambushes and operations. Despite a previously offered truce plan involving the release of hostages and Palestinian prisoners, Israel remains firm in its demand for the immediate release of all hostages. The conflict has resulted in a staggering death toll, with over 231 Palestinians killed according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Alongside the Gaza conflict, global developments include President Putin declaring any Western troops in Ukraine as legitimate targets and the resignation of the UK's Deputy Prime Minister due to tax-related concerns, creating uncertainty for Keir Starmer's Labour government. The BBC Verify investigations have meticulously documented the scale of destruction and the impact of the Israeli military's actions within Gaza City. The ongoing conflict continues to cause immense suffering and has triggered a global humanitarian crisis. Thailand names Anutin Charnvirakul as Prime Minister amid political uncertainty. Anutin Charnvirakul, leader of the Bumjathai Party, has been elected Thailand's new Prime Minister, marking the third change in leadership within 2 years and highlighting the country's persistent political instability. The election followed the removal of Paetongtarn Shinawatra, the daughter of former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, by the Constitutional Court due to ethical violations. Anutin secured 247 votes from the 492-member House of Representatives, surpassing Pheu Thai's nominee, Chakasam Nidasiri. This victory underscores the Bumjathai Party's strategic positioning within the fragmented Thai political landscape. The election's outcome reflects a continued struggle between the Shinawatra family's influence and the backing of Bangkok's conservative royalist elite. Paetongtarn's removal, like that of her predecessor, demonstrates the judiciary's role in curtailing the Shinawatra's political ambitions. The Pheu Thai Party, previously dominant, is now sidelined, with its remaining candidate, Nidasiri, lacking public support and facing health challenges. Anutin, a seasoned politician with a long-held desire for the premiership, achieved his goal through a transactional approach, aligning with various groups including military-backed factions and, recently, the Progressive People's Party. His party holds only 69 seats, necessitating coalition agreements. The People's Party, holding the most seats, is itself barred from government formation due to court-imposed bans on its leaders. Public opinion, as reflected in a NIDA poll released in June, favored Nathafong Ruangpaniot of the People's Party as the most popular prime ministerial candidate, demonstrating a shift in voter preferences. This election signifies a pivotal moment in Thailand's political trajectory, characterized by judicial intervention, shifting alliances, and a persistent struggle for power between competing factions. The future government will undoubtedly face significant challenges navigating the complex dynamics of Thai politics. Trump reduces Japanese car tariffs following extensive negotiations. Following months of negotiations spurred by President Donald Trump's initial sweeping tariffs, an executive order was signed on Thursday, dramatically reducing tariffs on Japanese car imports. The agreement, formalized in July, will lower tariffs from the current 27.5% to a significant 15% for almost all Japanese exports, including vehicles and pharmaceuticals. This move provides crucial relief for automotive giants such as Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, mitigating uncertainty stemming from the earlier tariffs. The agreement represents a substantial concession from Japan, which has committed to investing $550 billion in U.S. projects and gradually opening its economy to American goods. This includes a commitment to purchasing $80 billion worth of U.S. goods annually, encompassing agricultural products like fertilizers and bioethanol. Notably, Japan has also agreed to increase its rice purchases by 75%, a previously resisted move designed to protect its domestic agricultural industry. President Trump lauded the deal as massive, emphasizing its benefits for all parties involved. The primary objective is to reduce America's trade deficit with Japan and provide U.S. businesses with breakthrough openings. The Japanese economy, heavily reliant on exporting goods, particularly cars which account for approximately 20% of its total exports, stands to benefit considerably. Toyota, for example, had previously warned that the tariffs would cost the company around $10 billion this year. Following the executive order's signing, shares in Japanese carmakers and parts suppliers experienced a notable rise in Tokyo's stock market. The agreement signifies a pivotal shift in trade relations, responding to the global repercussions of Trump's initial tariffs and ultimately aiming to foster a more balanced economic partnership between the United States and Japan. The deal represents a strategic adjustment within the evolving landscape of international commerce. Trump's tariffs drive exporters towards China amid trade disruptions. Donald Trump's tariffs on goods from numerous countries are prompting a significant shift in global trade, with exporters increasingly turning to China as an alternative market. Brazil, heavily impacted by a 50% U.S. import tax on coffee, is a prime example, witnessing a surge in interest from Chinese buyers and a record number of firms registering to export to China. Coffee trader Hugo Portes describes this situation as a shining light for Brazilian exporters. Similarly, Indian exporters of tea and seafood, facing similar tariffs related to the Ukraine conflict, are also prioritizing China as their next largest export market. The impact is being felt across multiple sectors. Brazilian coffee bean exporter Fernanda Pizal reports a decline in U.S. demand, leading to a shift in sales towards China and other markets like Japan and Europe. U.S. coffee roasters anticipate a 25% price increase per bag of Brazilian beans, potentially raising coffee prices for consumers. In India, the Seafood Exporters Association of India Secretary General K.N. Raghavan expresses concern about the impact on smaller U.S. businesses and anticipates a challenging period. He highlights China as the primary alternative market for Indian seafood exports. European exporters also see potential in China, particularly given ongoing trade negotiations. The situation underscores a broader trend of trade diversion driven by U.S. tariffs. While the White House aims to pressure Russia and weaken global trade partners, the consequences are reshaping global supply chains and impacting businesses worldwide. The shift towards China represents a significant challenge for U.S. importers and a potential opportunity for Chinese buyers. Concerns remain regarding the long-term effects on U.S. consumers and the overall stability of international trade relations. The situation is dynamic, with ongoing trade talks and negotiations expected to influence the future of these trade flows. Trump seeks Supreme Court intervention in FTC Commissioner firing. President Donald Trump's administration has petitioned the Supreme Court to allow him to permanently remove Federal Trade Commission FTC Commissioner Rebecca Kelly Slaughter, escalating a legal battle concerning executive authority over independent federal agencies. The request follows a recent decision by a divided federal appeals court ordering Slaughter's reinstatement after Trump's attempted firing in March, a move that contradicted federal law governing commissioner dismissals requiring cause. Solicitor General D. John Sire argued before the Supreme Court that lower courts had wrongly intervened, asserting the administration's right to remove a commissioner deemed unsuitable. The core of the dispute centers on the administration's strategy of removing democratic voices from influential positions within government agencies. This pattern has been repeatedly successful before the Supreme Court in recent months, raising concerns about the court's interpretation of the relationship between the executive branch and independent agencies. The administration's actions highlight a deliberate effort to circumvent established legal procedures and challenge a long-standing precedent established in 1935, Humphrey's Executor v. U.S., which protects agency leadership from political interference. The appeals court's temporary order reinstating Slaughter, coupled with the Supreme Court's denial of Trump's attempt to remove her, underscored the court's skepticism regarding the administration's legal arguments. The administration's request for the Supreme Court to address the case on the merits indicates a willingness to fully engage with the legal challenges surrounding agency independence. The outcome of this case could have significant implications for the future of executive oversight of independent federal agencies and potentially reshape the legal landscape concerning presidential authority. The administration's strategy of challenging established precedent and removing dissenting voices has been a consistent theme in recent legal battles. Trump administration sues Boston over sanctuary policy, but the Justice Department has filed a lawsuit against Boston, targeting Mayor Michelle Wu and the city's police department over Boston's sanctuary policies. This legal action centers on the city's adherence to the Boston Trust Act, enacted in 2014 and amended in 2019, which restricts local law enforcement from making arrests solely based on immigration and customs enforcement, ICE warrants, preventing the holding of individuals at the request of ICE, and limiting the sharing of release information. The Justice Department contends that these provisions represent an intentional effort to obstruct federal immigration enforcement and impede communication between federal, state, and local law enforcement. Mayor Wu vehemently denounced the lawsuit as an unconstitutional attack, characterizing it as part of a broader authoritarian agenda. She emphasized Boston's status as a thriving economic and cultural hub and asserted the city's commitment to defending its laws and the constitutional rights of cities, citing previous court rulings supporting such protections. The lawsuit highlights a growing conflict between the Trump administration's efforts to increase deportations and the policies of cities that limit cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. Attorney General Pam Bondi has previously threatened prosecution for non-compliant local officials, further escalating the tensions. The Justice Department's lawsuit mirrors similar actions against Los Angeles, New York City, and Chicago, all alleging violations of federal immigration law. However, a federal judge recently ruled that the administration cannot withhold funding from Boston, a decision that followed a previous dismissal of a lawsuit against Chicago. The judge determined the Justice Department lacked standing to sue in that case. This legal battle underscores the ongoing debate surrounding the balance between federal immigration enforcement and local autonomy, with significant implications for cities across the nation. The administration's strategy of targeting sanctuary cities represents a key component of its immigration agenda. Justice Department weighing ban on transgender gun ownership amidst controversy. Senior Justice Department officials are currently exploring proposals to restrict the firearm rights of transgender individuals, following the Minneapolis Catholic Church shooting. This internal discussion, spurred by the attack involving a transgender woman, represents a significant escalation of the Trump administration's efforts targeting transgender Americans. The administration has previously barred transgender service members and mandated that transgender inmates be housed in facilities aligning with their assigned birth genders. The Justice Department is considering using its rulemaking authority to build upon the ban on transgender military service and declare that individuals experiencing gender dysphoria, the psychological distress associated with a mismatch between one's sex assigned at birth and their gender identity, constitute a mental illness warranting the loss of Second Amendment rights. This approach relies on the inclusion of gender dysphoria within the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM. Critics, including clinical instructor Alejandra Caraballo at Harvard Law School, warn that this strategy could establish a dangerous precedent, potentially leading to the infringement of rights for other vulnerable populations, such as veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. GLAAD spokesperson notes the administration's tendency to scapegoat the transgender community, highlighting the group's minimal representation, less than 2% of the U.S. population, and disproportionate vulnerability to crime. Despite the fact that only 5 of the more than 5,700 mass shootings in America between January 2013 and the present were perpetrated by transgender individuals, some conservative allies of the president have linked gender dysphoria to mental instability and the potential for firearm misuse. The Justice Department's stated goal is to prevent violence from individuals experiencing gender dysphoria while they are deemed unstable and unwell. Attorney General Pam Bondi's Justice Department has also launched a broad effort to target gender-affirming care, including issuing subpoenas to medical providers offering transgender medical procedures to minors. Bondi previously advocated for gun-restricting laws, including a state law raising the age requirements for gun purchases following the Parkland school shooting. The department is actively evaluating options to address violence stemming from specific mental health challenges and substance abuse disorders. The Justice Department's actions have drawn criticism for their potential to exacerbate discrimination and infringe upon the rights of a marginalized community. Trump's nominee's past Twitter activity raises concerns. Donald Trump's nominee to lead the Bureau of Labor Statistics, E.J. Antoni, has a documented history of inflammatory and concerning online activity dating back to 2017, revealed through a since-deleted Twitter account. The account, operated by Antoni under various usernames including FDABOMSAWAY, featured sexually degrading attacks, bigoted remarks, and conspiracy theories. CN verified that all posts originated from this single account, sharing strikingly similar biographical details with Antoni. Antoni, a vocal critic of the BLS, was also present as a bystander during the January 6th Capitol riot. Despite this involvement, he was nominated for the position. His appointment follows Trump's decision to fire the Biden-appointed BLS Commissioner, Erica McIntyre, after accusations of corruption regarding job growth estimates. The Twitter account displayed a pattern of misogynistic and offensive comments targeting prominent figures, including Senator Kamala Harris, Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and Democratic Congresswomen like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib. Antony frequently used derogatory terms, spread conspiracy theories, and engaged with far-right online communities, including promoting the QAnon conspiracy theory and referencing the American Independent Party's 1968 presidential candidate George Wallace. Furthermore, Antony made explicit and disturbing comments about LGBTQ individuals, including falsely accusing Representative Ilhan Omar of incest and making offensive remarks about CNN anchors Don Lemon and Anderson Cooper. He also promoted the debunked theory surrounding the murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich and engaged with a profile promoting Nazi imagery. Antony's academic background includes a PhD in economics from Northern Illinois University, and he currently works as an economist for the Heritage Foundation, the architect of Project 2025. Concerns have been raised about his academic work, particularly a recent report suggesting the American economy has been in recession since 2022. The Senate Health, Education, Labor and Pensions Committee will hold a hearing for Antony's nomination, although it is a rare occurrence. His nomination faces significant scrutiny given the nature of his past online behavior and the potential implications for the BLS's credibility. The White House defended Antony's actions, stating that Trump has nominated him to fix issues at the BLS and restore trust in job reports. Trump's growing influence over the Federal Reserve under scrutiny. Recent developments surrounding President Donald Trump's nomination of Stephen Moran as a Federal Reserve Governor, coupled with a criminal investigation into another Fed official, highlight a significant and concerning trend: the potential for increased presidential control over the central bank. Moran's appointment, alongside the Justice Department's investigation, fuels speculation that Trump is actively attempting to reshape the Fed's operations. Moran, currently serving as chief of Trump's Council of Economic Advisors, stated his intention to take a leave of absence from the White House if confirmed, assuring lawmakers of his commitment to independent action. However, his responses during the confirmation hearing raised serious concerns. Senator Elizabeth Warren criticized Moran, asserting he would be perceived as a puppet, undermining the Fed's independence. Moran emphasized the paramount importance of the Fed's independence and denied any pressure from the White House to influence interest rate decisions. Despite Trump's persistent calls for rate cuts, the situation is further complicated by the Justice Department's ongoing investigation into another Fed governor, raising questions about potential political interference within the institution. Trump's repeated demands for a Fed overhaul, including his criticism of fabricated jobs data and calls for the dismissal of Fed Chair Jerome Powell and board member Lisa Cook, underscore his aggressive attempts to exert control. Cook's denial of allegations of mortgage fraud and her subsequent legal challenge to her potential termination add another layer to this escalating conflict. The closure of the world's largest illegal sports streaming site, Streamiest, represents a separate, yet related, issue, highlighting the broader challenges of regulation and control in the digital age. The appointment of Moran to fill the vacant position previously held by Adriana Kugler, who resigned last month, provides Trump with a strategic opportunity to consolidate his influence over the Fed's direction. Trump allies explore offering Eric Adams' role in administration. Our President Donald Trump's advisors are privately discussing potential employment opportunities for New York City Mayor Eric Adams within the federal administration, primarily aimed at diminishing the challenge posed by Democratic mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani. Steve Witkoff, a key Trump confidant and Middle East envoy, met with Adams earlier this week to explore these possibilities. Sources indicate that an ambassadorship, potentially with countries like Saudi Arabia, has been floated as a potential role for Adams. However, no formal offers have been made, and the discussions remain fluid and preliminary. Mayor Adams swiftly responded to the speculation, issuing a statement reaffirming his commitment to his re-election bid, stating that serving as mayor is his sole ambition. He highlighted his administration's achievements, including crime reduction, educational improvements, housing development, and cost savings for families. Adams emphasized his continued focus on the safety and well-being of New Yorkers. The situation is further complicated by the potential for former Governor Andrew Cuomo to consolidate opposition votes against Mamdani following his defeat in the June Democratic primary. Trump has publicly expressed a desire for a one-on-one mayoral race, explicitly stating his aversion to Mamdani and characterizing him as potentially a communist mayor. Witkoff's meeting with Adams was kept highly confidential, with many White House aides only learning about the outreach through news reports. The initial discussions represent a significant development in the mayoral race, introducing a new dynamic and raising questions about Adams' future. Mamdani has responded by challenging Cuomo to a debate and criticizing his alliance with Trump. The unfolding events highlight the intense competition for the New York City mayoral seat and the lengths to which political figures are willing to go to secure victory. The situation remains dynamic, with ongoing negotiations and shifting alliances. Trump urges Europe to pressure Russia and China amid Ukraine war. Donald Trump, in a call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other European leaders, urged a strengthened effort to end the war in Ukraine, shifting the onus of action primarily to European nations. Following the call, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that 26 countries have committed to a potential peacekeeping force contingent upon a finalized ceasefire. A key element of this strategy involves bolstering Ukraine's armed forces and deploying European troops, alongside an American safety net, as a security guarantee. Trump emphasized the need for Europe to cease purchasing Russian oil, highlighting the $1.1 billion in fuel sales received from the EU over the past year. He also advocated for economic pressure on China, asserting that Russia's war efforts are being funded by both. The administration is privately wary of disrupting negotiations while seeking to increase pressure on Russia. Following the call, Zelensky reiterated the importance of escalating pressure on Moscow and all countries engaging in trade with Russia, suggesting secondary sanctions and special trade tariffs. He rejected Putin's suggestion of a direct meeting in Moscow, stating that if a meeting isn't desired, Putin should extend an invitation. Trump has previously threatened severe consequences for Putin if the war ends, and is currently targeting countries that purchase Russian goods and oil. The U.S. is open to providing limited security guarantees, potentially involving U.S. pilots flying air support missions, though excluding ground troops. Despite these efforts, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov indicated a huge amount of work remains before a top-level meeting between Moscow and Kyiv can occur. The administration is focused on leveraging economic pressure as a means to force a resolution, while carefully managing the potential impact on ongoing negotiations. The situation remains complex, with both sides emphasizing the need to increase the pressure on Russia to achieve a lasting peace.